So trading off is, of course, because each point on the line, here again, you have your curve. Let's say you start right here. Well, you are producing all the guns and zero, because right here is zero butter. If you move to this point to produce more butter, well, you're producing less guns because now this point is lower than the previous point. And let's say you decide to produce more butter. Well, then it's even lower of a value until you get here and you've zeroed out guns. It also goes the other way. If you decide to produce more guns, you produce less butter. So a trade-off is, of course, increasing the production of one thing is going to decrease the production of the other. So your trade-off is what you are not being able to produce of the other good because you increased the cost of that good. So the reason this happens, of course, like I said before, scarcity. There is finite resources, land, labor, and capital for unlimited wants and needs. So we have to decide how to best use what is available to get the most out of it. So you have to make the decision. It's not always stuck that way. So there is a way for that curve to grow. So first of all, here's some more key terms. You got the efficient, and that means if you're producing, I'm going to draw another graph, anything on the frontier, you're being efficient. You're maximizing resources. You're using everything available to either produce a certain amount of guns and a certain amount of butter, but you're using everything that is available to you. The production possibility curves are great to show that you're efficient. You can even show if your economy is growing or if it is shrinking. And of course, you are able to anticipate what is your opportunity cost when you're choosing the amount of each good to produce. Because if I look here, then I'm like, okay, so because I'm producing this amount of butter, then I'm missing out on all of this production of guns. If I'm producing this amount of guns, I'm missing out on all of these this opportunity to produce butter. Efficiency is important because if you're going to maximize your production, that means nothing's going to waste. Nothing is being unutilized. And you are outputting as much of those goods and services that you can. The frontier represents that, and that means that anything along the line, this is your frontier, that line is efficient. So you want to mark for that. You want to aim for that. So again, here's your curve. So if we're going to label all of the spots that are efficient, that would be B, D, and C. Even if I'm producing more guns, more butter than guns, I am using all my resources. If I then move along the curve to produce more guns, I'm still on the frontier, so I'm still efficient, even though I'm producing more guns than butter. And then, of course, going all the way to B, the same thing there. Even all the way to where you were producing 0 of one and all of the other. When you hit the axis, so this is 0 butter. And that is I'm great at lines. I'm so good. But right here is your 0, value of 0. And this is like maybe a value of 15 million. 50 million guns. Well, like maybe 15 million butter. I don't know. But if you're all the way hitting the x-axis over here, remember this is your x-axis and this is your y, you're producing 0 guns, but like 15 million butter. If you're all over here, you're producing 0 butter, but 15 million guns. Did I say that right? I don't know. So if you are not hitting the frontier, you're not using everything that's available to you. So it's inside the curve. And that would be A. It's called an underutilization of resources. You're using fewer than it's available. And why would you want to do that? If you were capable of producing more, which makes your economy better, why would you want to reach that maximum output? It's really not a fair move. You have 2 hours to spare and you decide to, do something that's not needed, like play video games, when you have to choose between either sleeping or doing homework. Well, maximizing it would be maybe spending an hour doing homework, an hour sleeping. But if you throw something else in there that throws everything off, you are underutilizing your time. You're down here. So anywhere is full efficiency. Anywhere below it is inefficient. If you go outside, remember, it's not possible because this is the maximum spot. Can't go that far. It's like basically saying, I want to spend $15 million to rebuild a home. Well, I don't have $15 million. That's not possible. So if anyone's got $15 million, you know where I am. Growth. Every company, every business, every economy wants to grow. So how do you grow? So this is only current. Ooh, all these lines. This is the current. This is what we have current resources for. But economies don't stay stagnant. If you're using everything efficiently and things are always changing, you're either going to grow or shrink. So there's a lot of reasons why something could grow. We don't want it to shrink. But growth could be caused by, you have a large influx of immigration, which can increase the workforce. So now your natural resource and factor of production of labor has increased. The maximum amount of goods the nation can produce increases because you have more people available to work the assembly lines, whatever the process of production is. So now you can produce more, or something becomes more available. Lower cost helps to increase production because now you can put the cost somewhere else. You also have other things like technology, which makes it easier to produce something and cuts the time down. You have more resources becoming available. You have things that open up new production. So you're going to see, this is our current, the X2. And so when it shifts to the right, do you see that's the right? Then you are going to this new curve, and that means that it is a growth. Because now the numbers on your X and Y graph are greater. Moving up, that means you're increasing value. Moving to the right is increasing value. So when these new resources become available, your frontier shifts. You're now more resources available to you. So your maximum production has increased. The unfortunate side is that your maximum production can decrease too. So that means you have your current production possibility. This is your X1. But if you shift to the left, then you're going to decrease. And that can happen with so many different things. A country goes to war, loses land. You have the population ages, supply of labor, like maybe there's a huge exodus out of the country. There's also, what if you have natural disasters that ruin production? So, for instance, there was a drought in Kansas like a couple of years ago. And so the corn fields didn't produce a lot of yield. And corn, well, first of all, is really important in food. But also, did you know that corn is used in ethanol? And ethanol is a chemical that you put in gas, and it helps engines burn the gas more efficiently. And in Arizona, we actually have laws that means that ethanol levels have to be higher in the summer because of the heat being so hot and high. It basically helps the engines from blowing up. So when the corn crops were not good, we produced less ethanol that year. So there was actually a gas shortage in Arizona that year in the summer due to an ethanol shortage, not necessarily an oil shortage, but an ethanol shortage, because our current law, we had to have a certain amount of ethanol. But that would be basically, it would be decreasing. It would move to the left because, your values are going to 0 and your values are going down to 0. So because the values are decreasing, you're moving to the left. So that cost doesn't always equal money. So it doesn't mean that it's always going to be in a profit concept or, actual dollar signs, but it could just be that you are giving one alternative for another. It's the opportunity cost. Remember, in your decisions, your opportunity cost isn't always money. You could be making decisions that are considered economic decisions every day. I choose to sleep in So then what happens is I can't take a shower that morning. My opportunity cost is the smell of my body. Increase in BO. So production possibility curves is just helping people see what is going to be the opportunity cost of every decision. So for instance, here's if we do watermelon and shoes. So if you're going to increase the cost of the amount of watermelons you produce, well, then your resources have, as you see, these are decreasing. So we have increase, decrease. I can spell. But as you can see, like, so if I were to go from 5 million shoes to 9 million, well, then I lose 2 million watermelons. So it can go the other way too. So when you look at a curve, it's not always red left to right. If you remember how graphs work, they're like infinite lines that go in both directions. So however you move along this curve, whether up or down, you're basically, one is decreasing while the other is increasing. So look at it again. How many shoes do we give up to jump to the next level, producing 14 million watermelons? Only 6 million more. These are millions, by the way. So if we go from 8 million watermelons to 14 million watermelons, what happens to our shoes? We lose, we go negative 2 million pairs of shoes. So your opportunity cost, 2 million pairs of shoes. This is probably a really abstract thing because we don't make this economic decision all the time. But law of increasing cost is basically the sacrifice of producing one over another can vary depending on the goods and the choice being made. So it means as production switches from one item to another, more and more resources are necessary to increase the production. So more and more resources. So it curves because you see how when you have, like, it's kind of straight. So it's not this huge change in trading off from one point to another. But then all of a sudden there's kind of this a little bit more dramatic decrease and then a little bit more dramatic decrease. So imagine, like, for instance, between watermelon and shoes, if you want to increase the production of shoes, you need to build factories, you need rubber, you need fabric, and you need a different kind of labor. So you have to invest more and more in different kinds of resources. Watermelons, you need land, tractors. And so say you take the land and you go from farm to factory. Well, that's a totally different way to use the land, right? You gotta, like, bulldoze all the fields and then you gotta build this building on top. Well, let's say you want to now go the other way. You got to bulldoze factories and then try to fertilize the land. And that can get harder and harder to do. If it was not doing this increase, if it was a 1-for-1 and an exact exchange every single time, you would see more of a steady, straight line going straight down. There's never a variable in the trade-off. So as we see, basically that over time, you have to use poorer and poorer land, or you have to spend more and more money to build more and more factories, bigger and more increased, like, technology. So the trade-off can be not as simple as a 1-for-1 opportunity to switch from producing one to another. So for instance, these companies that are producing the vaccines, they might have resources for their particular orders for goods and services available. Well, now they got to increase the production for needles and sterilized, those kind of things, and mask as the order goes in that particular vaccine. So they have to kind of eliminate everything in the factory that would not be resourced for those and just use all the space for that. So it can then cause them to have delays in their factory production of other orders. And then so more labor has to be used and more time has to be used for shifting. So the efficiency of producing the other orders might go down. So the shape of the curve is specifically because of law of increasing cost. Heck, if this didn't exist, we wouldn't be calling it a production possibility curve. It'd be a production possibility line, but it's not. It's a curve.